So the first barrier is criticizing the subject or the speaker. If we have a problem with the subject, the content, or the speaker, then we don't paraphrase, we don't give reciprocal information, we don't do those 10 different things. Listening only for facts. What exactly does that mean? Listening for facts is about winning. When I listen for facts, I'm listening for facts to prove you wrong, which means I want to win, which means I'm not actively listening. I'm listening to get to the bottom of what I want to say. It's hearing you to allow me to speak. It's hearing you to interject and interrupt by not being quiet. So listening only for facts is very dangerous. What we need to learn to listen for is the idea and not the facts. Facts justify an idea. Fake attention. What exactly is fake attention? Eye contact, nodding of the head. These are things we could do while ignoring the other person. Most of us practice great eye contact. And many of us cannot repeat what the person said 2 hours after they say it because it was fake attention. We tolerate or create distractions. Now, most of us don't create distractions, but remember, a major barrier to effectively or actively listening is tolerating distractions. So tolerating distractions just means that when we were distracted, we did nothing to stop that distraction for whatever reason. Evading the difficult, that's a big one. Most times, the more we communicate and the more we give and receive feedback is the more difficult the conversation becomes. The collaborative process becomes more and more difficult because we now get to issues that we deem to be impossible to resolve. And once it becomes impossible to resolve, what we do is we step away. We break, we say let's come back next week, and so we evade the difficult, and every time we meet, we have to begin the process again and again and again. So evading the difficult prevents us from actively listening. Submitting to emotional words, also very important. Emotional words are triggers. It's designed to derail. It's communicated from an aggressive standpoint as opposed to an assertive standpoint. An emotional word is stupid. That's a stupid idea. Ridiculous. That's a ridiculous idea. Right? Someone says to you, I don't know, that sounds ridiculous to me. You get a trigger. You get a twitch. This person is aggressing me. He's insulting me. And so once that happens, we stop all active listening. All we could focus on is the insult or the perceived insult. So when you submit to an emotional word, you have stopped listening. Because the person may have said something that triggered an emotional response in you, but the core of what they were saying may have had merit. And if you didn't listen to what they were saying because of the emotional trigger, you would miss the merit behind what they were saying. You may have a personal bias. That personal bias could come from history. Where you worked before, does this person remind you of your previous supervisor? You could have a gender bias, an age bias, a cultural bias, a country of origin bias, a religious bias. All these biases gets in the way. And these biases gets in the way most of the time because we don't own the bias. Language and or cultural differences, which is another form of bias. And then the last two I highlighted in red because they're extremely important and I want to spend some more time on them. And so number 9 is pre-planning counter-argument and mentally preparing response. And number 10 is wasting time difference between speed of speech and speed of thought, what we call waste thought power. So let's look at each in a little more depth. So pre-planning counter-argument. This is something that we do all the time. We may hear a speaker say something with which we strongly disagree. Our focus on this disagreement causes us to spend more time developing counter-arguments. So in other words, instead of listening to what the person is saying, we hear snippets of what they say and then we have a conversation in our own head about what they said and how to respond to it, which means we missed more than 50% of what they actually said. That's very dangerous. And in part 4, when we talk about manifest versus latent listening, I want you to observe a role play exercise that's part of the process to really understand what that looks like. We are busy formulating questions in our mind to ask the speaker, or we may be thinking of arguments that can be used to rebut the speaker. That whole process, once we do that in our head, it gets in the way of us actually listening. In cases like this, our listening efficiency drops to nearly zero because of what is called pre-planned responses. When he says this, I'm going to say this. I know his argument. I know what he usually says because, we have this relationship and he always says this. And you have this conversation in your own head which stops you from listening. So the key is, hear the speaker out before you judge him or her, because what that person says this time may be different than what you think they were about to say based on the last time. Very, very important. That requires discipline and commitment and consistency in the process of listening. And then finally, what we call waste thought power. We have so much time to listen that we sometimes don't. We think faster than someone else can speak. Most of us speak at 125 words to 175 words per minute, but we have the mental capacity to understand someone speaking at 400 words per minute, which means we don't listen. When we listen to the average speaker, we are using 25% of our mental capacity, which means we have 75% to do something else with. Which means, what do? Our minds wander. We get arrogant in ourselves. It's human nature. That's why it's exhausting to listen, because you have to make a choice. You have to say, okay, my mind is about to wander. I now have to pay attention. And that process is exhausting. Trying to make sure your mental capacity does not take you somewhere else is exhausting. So we need to make a real effort to listen carefully and concentrate more on our mental capacity on the listening act. If we don't concentrate, we soon find that our minds have turned to other things. Very, very difficult to not turn our minds to other things. Right now you're taking this course and your mind may be moving to other things because you think, I may be going on too much. I may be speaking too slowly based on how you think, and so you may have perceived that you got the point already. Your mind is wandering. What's the damage right now? The damage right now is I'm going to go to another slide and your mind is going to continue to wander, and you would have missed something important in the lesson.